So we'll get started in just a minute, and just a reminder to everyone, if you would, thanks to hitting those mute buttons. And thank you all for being here. This is an event of the Nashville Jewish Book Series program of the Gordon Jewish Community Center. I'm Nancy Reisman. I'm a member of the JBS, and some rock and roll in there too. And I'm also a member of the creative writing program at Vanderbilt University. Just as you may have noticed, this evening's event will be recorded. This is the 5th year of the Jewish Book Series, which seeks to bring a variety of new books and ideas to the Nashville community, many of these works by Jewish writers or linked to Jewish culture or community interests. We hope to foster ongoing conversation and celebration and ongoing interest in new writing. Our sincere thanks to Vanderbilt Asian Studies Department, and especially tonight's moderator, Professor Ben Tran, to the Vanderbilt Creative Writing Program, to the JBS committee members, and I'll note here the energetic leadership of Margaret Littman and Amy Goldstein. And big thanks to all of you for joining us. Great thanks also to You and Me Books in New York, which will be handling the orders for your signed copies of Ms. Wang's memoir. You and Me Books is a small independent bookstore in New York's Chinatown, founded by Lucy Yu. Gratitude also to tonight's event sponsors, Parnassus Books, the Porch Literary Center, and the Jewish Book Council. So, to support the Jewish Book Series and connect with other local readers, we hope you'll join Kai Y'all, our organization for book lovers in Middle Tennessee and beyond. Membership is $36, and you can find details on the Gordon JCC website. You can also find the full schedule for the JBS series. On March 14th, in conjunction with the Memphis JCC, we'll have a virtual event with author Heather Cabot of her book, The New Chardonnay, in conjunction with the Memphis JCC. On March 28th, Wayne Fetterman and Alan Zweibel, and April 7th, Louis Kemp. And I believe these are all virtual. Finally, before I introduce our moderator, Ben Tran, I'll mention here that later he'll be welcoming your questions, which you can send him via the chat function, so keep those in mind. Ben Tran is an associate professor in Vanderbilt's Department of Asian Studies and Department of English, a much revered member of the Vanderbilt community. His research examines the politics and aesthetics of 20th and 21st century Southeast Asian, Asian American, and Anglophone literatures. As the repercussions of colonialism and decolonialization, modern warfare, climate change, and globalization continue to unfold in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Rim, he examines how literary and cultural works depict and resist modernity's vertiginous transformations. He's the author of Post-Mandarin, Masculinity and Aesthetic Modernity in Colonial Vietnam, and he is currently at work on foreign mother tongues, literary dubbing, and modern literature. His family immigrated from Vietnam, and he grew up in Louisiana and Atlanta, Georgia. He studied at Emory University and at the University of California at Berkeley, and he has lived in Nashville with his family for many years. Welcome to you, Ben.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, everyone, for being here on this beautiful Nashville spring. I know it's spring evening. I know it's the weather's really nice, so I appreciate all of you coming here to have this discussion with our guest author. And let me just give a brief introduction before we launch into the discussion about this wonderful book. Qian Wang is a New Yorker through and through. She's a best-selling author and a civil rights litigator. She graduated from 2 prestigious schools, the Yale Law School and Swarthmore College. And she is also now a managing partner of Gottlieb and Wang LLP. It is a law firm that is dedicated to advancing education, disability, and civil rights on behalf, this is not surprising, of her good work, of marginalized communities. She has been very successful in terms of publishing. She has published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Elle, Harper's Bazaar, and The Cut. She has appeared, she's also a TV star on the Today Show, MSNBC, and NPR. And now she is living in the Brooklyn boroughs with her dogs, Salty, and I want to get these names right, Salty and Peppers, and with her husband there as well. So welcome, Qian. Julie, let me start by clarifying something. Are you, I can't see you on the screen. Are you unmuted?
I'm here.
Okay, let me see. Let me adjust my view here.
I am.
Okay, there you are. So welcome. Thank you for being here with us. And before we discuss things, in our email correspondence, people might not know this, but there was some mention that I'm coaching an Akiva basketball team. We've named ourselves the Space Lasers, and you said you were a basketball fan. So I just wanted to clarify your allegiances in terms of the round ball, to see if you're a New York Knicks fan or a Nets fan or some other round ball fan.
Oh, I have to say the Knicks.
The Knicks, okay. All right. You're a New Yorker through and through, so there's dedication.
Absolutely.
There. So thank you for that as just an icebreaker there. Well, like I said, I'd like to thank Nancy for the introduction. And like Nancy mentioned before, she's a great colleague of mine, very endearing, great to do this with her. We're going to have a brief discussion. It's going to be a casual discussion. I have some questions and some thoughts. We're just gonna have a conversation. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will be sure to read them. Or if you'd like, cue me and either with an electronic raise hand, because I can't see everyone on the screen, or just put it in the chat and I will call on you. So let me just start by saying that I am very grateful for the bravery that it took to write this book, because you bear out a lot, and these ideas of the secret, and we'll get to that, and your life as an undocumented immigrant in New York. But I wanted to begin by asking, you open the book by talking about, 6 months after you become a citizen, you get this video from Obama, and then Trump is elected. And, you say at the beginning of the book, at the end of the ceremony of you becoming a citizen, a videotape President Obama greeted me as a fellow American, and it dawned on me that though I had become American decades ago, I had never been recognized as one. 6 months later, I awoke to a somber and funeral New York, mourning for a nation that chose to elect a president on a platform of xenophobia and intolerance. It was then that I dug up my voice, staring shame and self-doubt in the face. I tossed my first attempt at this project and put my fingers to the keyboard anew. I document these stories for myself and my family, and not the least, my uncle, our innominate hero. I write this also for Americans and immigrants everywhere. The heartbreak of one immigrant is never far from that of another. I just wanted to ask you to comment on that beautiful opening, and what led you to do this during this era, and what is so significant about telling stories during a historical period of intolerance.
For most of my life, I've never talked about these years that are now contained in a book that's widely accessible. And for all of those years, I thought that I was singularly shameful, that there was something singularly illegal and bad and unacceptable about me. And it took a lot of healing. It took a lot of security, financial security, access to medical resources, access to mental health support, and finally, the privilege of calling America my home, privilege of calling myself an American, to see that it is really not just my story. It's not just me. I am embedded in a rich and vibrant community of people who likewise are made to feel this way from the minute they arrive, from the minute they are born, every day of their lives. They are made to feel less human, less American, and less acceptable. And so as I watched our nation reel into the election and its outcome, I realized that the privilege was now mine to speak up and share the story that I did have access to, which was mine. And it was not to say that all undocumented immigrants, all Asian American immigrant stories are the same. We are all dimensional. We are not a monolith, but I wanted to hold to the light everything that I felt ashamed of for so long, in hopes of showing others out there that they too deserve to be heard. They deserve to have their stories on shelves and in the media, and hoped to shed some light on the humanity and dimensionality of experiences that are so very much erased from our country.
Thank you for that. I mean, I know it must be hard to write the book and to continue to talk about this. And this is what I really appreciate, because I love Manhattan's Chinatown. And your book really made me think about all the stories that people carry with them as I pass these people on the train, on Canal Street, on Broadway, on Mott Street, all those streets. It really, I never thought about it in this way of New York and the proximity of Manhattan's Chinatown to the garment industry in terms of the sweatshops. And so it really brought a new perspective to Chinatown, your beloved Chinatown. I wanted to kind of skip back to the end of the book and talk about basically what that singular shame that you so beautifully expressed earlier is about, this secret that as a child, or your parents, the tension in that family was so there that you had to keep this secret. And there's this beautiful moment of Judge Morgan Kristen, who, if I'm correct, married you and your husband in court. Is that correct? And you clerked for her, and she serves as the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and she's based in Anchorage. Is that correct? And so she played a significant role. I imagine she's a mentor to you, means a lot to you and your family. She seems very wise. And on the penultimate page of the memoir, and I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about this and repeating these words, you said you wanted to bring one line that she had to you, which is, secrets, they have so much power, don't they? And this is at the very end of the book. And can you, because the writer of your memoir, the definition of your memoir is to kind of let the secret out vis-a-vis the page. And can you just talk about why that line from the Judge Kristen, is so significant, and what it means to you in terms of this, how a secret can have so much power?
It caught me off guard when she responded with that sentence, because I had, for those who have yet to read the book, I was clerking for her months into many immigration appeals. These are people who have already been ordered to be deported, and many of these people at the center of these cases have been in America since they were 1-2 years old, and they were being deported for really nothing at all, nonviolent crimes. One guy dared to ask a police officer who showed up at his apartment to see his badge, and he ended up getting deported. And these cases really kind of lived deep down in me. And I just felt like, who am I to sit in judgment and advise the judge on these cases when I am no better than any of them? I am very much the same, and yet I never shared this truth about myself. So one day, as if my body just took over, I almost saw myself like disembodied walk into the judge's chamber, sit down across from her, and she just looks up, because it was not a scheduled meeting. I just walked in and I just told her, I was like, I grew up undocumented. These are all the things that happened. And I never had uttered those words to anyone outside my parents before. And she listens and she pauses and gives me space. And that sentence about secrets is one of the first that she says, like almost immediately. And I thought, yeah, yes, but how could you possibly know that? You were born here. You're white. You didn't immigrate. There's no way that you could possibly know that. How could you know that? It was as if she had been thinking about it her whole life. And it took me a good year after she said that for me to understand what she meant, which was, I mean, there were many things in that sentence, but one, all of us learn so early in life that there are things that seem to be unacceptable about us, and we learn to build up armor and walls to keep people out because we cannot accept those traits about ourselves, and therefore other people outside of us must never be able to accept them, and we must, to be loved, we must hide those traits. And that wasn't just something that was singularly about me or even my circumstance. That is a trait of being a human in the world, of being a child and growing up into an adult and carrying these wounds and scars with you until you are able to confront them. But the second facet of what she said, and it took me even longer to understand this, is that secrets essentially are what we tell ourselves about ourselves and what happened to us. And by virtue of having to keep something secret, we are telling ourselves that it is bad and it is shameful, rather than hewing to that narrative and continuing to keep the secret. The only way to break it is to embrace that part of us and own it and change the story, that this is not just something that happened to me, but something that I have made sense of, and something that actually fuels a lot of my powers and passions and talents. And Beautiful Country was really my attempt to do that, to embrace that which I most rejected about myself for so many decades.
How cathartic is this for you to write this book, to talk about this book, to have an audience in Nashville today through the JCC like this? I mean, how's it been for you?
I think the act of writing it itself, even if it had not found readers, was more healing than I could have anticipated or imagined. I wrote this book on my iPhone on my subway commute. And there would be days when I would be sitting in the corner of the subway train, just bawling my eyes out in a suit, going to court or wherever, and just bawling because I have happened on the memory of my mother shivering in the sushi processing plant. And then there are moments on the ride back where I'm just laughing out loud to myself because I'm thinking about how my dad saved up to buy me that toy that I wanted for so long. And so being able to relive those experiences, but having the new safety to really feel everything that that little girl did not have the luxury of allowing herself to feel, gave me so much new appreciation for, yes, me, the little girl who tried to just do her best, but also my parents, be able to see them from my adult perspective. I mean, they were younger than I am now, but also from my childhood perspective, and how they were very much trying to protect me and keep me safe the very best they could with next to no resources. But then to have this book out there and have people respond the way that they have, it has just been empowering and liberating beyond what I had even thought of. People who have never immigrated take the time to write me these long emails saying how deeply my story resonated with them, because they too were jealous of the girl in class who had the perfect dress and ate a popsicle every day after school. And they too were afraid of this teacher who was really mean to them, or they found their love of language and stories through the library. It just gives me so much hope and faith that when you really peel all of the layers back and dig deep down, none of us are that different from each other. All the labels that we hew to, all the barriers that we cling to, they really don't matter, because when you peel it back, we are our dreams and joys and hurts and wounds from those early seminal childhood years. And it's just given me great faith in humanity.
It's great. I wanted, part of this is, when I read it, when I was a kid, I lied about everything. And I still joke and lie. And part of it is because of the shame of poverty and being different from everybody else. And your book beautifully deals with this, right? And you had to lie to hide. I mean, you were taught at a very young age, like your dad kept saying, like telling you were born in America, like you've always lived here. At the end of the book, there are a couple of moments in the book that you beautifully write about lying and the necessity of that, and having to keep that secret, right? So you would not be deported. And you write, they are half lies, part lies, but lies are the same because they omit the pivotal truth. As I did as a child, I put these lies on and live inside them, but they refused to fit. The stack on my shoulders grew. And can you just talk about what it meant to not be able to kind of, as a child, right? My kids are listening in the car, they're driving back from a basketball tournament, actually. And I tell them never to lie, always speak the truth. But because of the shame, I understand this, and I, kids would ask me like, do you know kung fu, or do you know, are your relatives this and that? And there are moments when you did the same as well. And writing the memoir is the opposite. I mean, in this case, it's non-fictional, and this is not a lie. This is finally, this shame has kind of shed. I'm shedding it. I'm telling you what happened. And I just wanted to ask you about that burden of lying and what it meant. I mean, you seem to have a very capacious imaginary mind with all those books that you read. So in some ways you lived in a fictional world, and it's nice to fantasize, but can you talk about the burden of lying, or even the liberations or fantasies of lying?
Yeah, no, that's a really astute point, because I think that was part of what drew me so much to the library, to all the novels that I read, especially to the Babysitters Club and Sweet Valley Twins, because to my mind, those were kids who were actually American and normal. They were the complete opposite of me, and their lives were the complete opposite of mine. And so if I could borrow some facts from their lives, whether it was having, I think one lie that I shared in my book was that I said my dad was white, or having an actual home where you don't share the kitchen and bathroom with a bunch of other families. If I could borrow a little bit of those details and glue them to myself, then maybe I would become more acceptable and normal. But of course, anyone who has taken online, especially as a child, but at any point in their lives, know that it's exhausting. You have to maintain an appearance and a facade at all times. And deep down remains that shame that caused you to lie to begin with, which is who I actually am cannot be presented because it is not lovable. And unfortunately, for a lot of children who, whether they're due to immigration status, due to, I don't know, their parents' substance abuse, a myriad of things, really learn that they have to lie about these realities of their lives that they have no control over just to get by. And that shame and that rejection of who they are, when you get it so early in life, it becomes central to your identity. It becomes central to your understanding of how you go about the world and how you engage with people. And it took me very, very long to even see that, at the root of everything I did was a self-rejection. And to then disentangle that, some 20, 30 years later is much more difficult than, of course, if a child was told who you are is acceptable and you should be honest at all times. So I love that you tell your children that, because lying is a burden that the liar carries more so than the people being told the lies.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, because sometimes as a thinker and as a writer, I still find that self-rejection to be difficult. And you've gone to the best law school in the country. And I just wanted to ask you, how hard has it been for you to make a psychological leap? Because I grew up in Atlanta. I don't know, my parents still live there, but I don't know if I could go back to Atlanta and live there, right? It's just like too much. I commuted these long distances to go to a school, like you went to the lab, and how hard is it? Like when you're in the judge's chambers and you are on the other side now, right? Advising this person with a lot of power about what to do with these immigrants, right? How hard has that psychological leap been for you to kind of to ascend to such prestige and powers, but then to have this background and basically to live this life of the burden of this lie? I mean, how psychologically, how hard has it been? You thank multiple therapists, and I appreciated that in your acknowledgements. And so I just wanted to ask you about what it's been like for you to be on the other side of the chambers.
Yeah, I think I just got a message saying my internet's unstable, so let me know if I cut out. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I actually see one of my Yale Law School classmates in the crowd. Hi, Michelle. Thanks for being here. I think she
Hi
and
there.
I think she and I can both tell you that by virtue of going to a fancy school, it doesn't really fix any of your problems. I, of course, thought that if I jumped through the right hoops and got all the gold stars and got all of the accolades, that my problems inside would be fixed by everything outside. And it really took me having to go to all these fancy schools and clerking and working for a top firm and living in a fancy Upper East Side apartment for me to realize, oh, everything that I thought could fix me, I now have. And yet I am the least happy I've ever been. I distinctly remember waking up in that apartment full of light, full of space, thinking I have arrived and I'm the most depressed I have ever been because I feel like that little shell of a girl inside just wearing her mother's suit, walking around and pretending to be someone else entirely. And that cognitive dissonance, I think, unfortunately lives within a lot of us because by virtue of the gaps and divides that we have climbed over or flown over or clawed our way through. And I thought that I would get to a point where that cognitive dissonance goes away, where I'm not thinking, oh, but I was this girl. How come I'm this adult now speaking in a room in front of 1,000 people? What am I doing? How am I in this courtroom now advocating for an immigrant when I was that terrified immigrant? And in more recent years, I have come to peace with the fact that that dissonance may not ever go away. It keeps me connected to my roots and where I come from. When I am walking in a fancy suit to the courthouse and I see on the Manhattan streets a little immigrant girl picking through the trash with her mother still to this day, it's only natural that my heart hurts. It's only natural that I feel a profound sense of guilt, survivor's guilt. But I don't have to continue pretending. I can own both parts of myself and know that I can be both at one time and know that one influences the other and fuels the other. And so, yeah, every day of my life, I deal with that psychological gap, that leap that I have made. I think what's unnatural is that this societal gap exists in our world, that there are people so very poor and people so very privileged. And of course, then it should be unnatural that I have lived on both ends. Mm-hmm. And it is my job now to start to heal that divide and bring more of what I have into that world where that little girl is still digging through the trash.
Yeah. It's a very powerful aspect and to think about the different, again, about the different lives in New York that we pass and we see in any city. I mean, Nashville is going through a boom right now, and the number of people being displaced and how expensive homes have gotten, it's hard, and the cognitive dissonance, like you say, is very difficult. I wanted to talk about how those different cognitive dissonance sides of us can't be hidden. There's a beautiful scene where your parents get into a fight. It's the most intense fight. And so many parts of your book give me goosebumps just talking about it. So I'm just sitting here. And I think your dad just bought the car. And your mom, we don't know this yet, but mom is preparing for you to go to Canada as legal immigrants. And there's a scene where your dad reaches across the dinner table and slaps your mom. And being the strong-willed woman that she is, she tells you that everything is fine. He doesn't like the food. He's, having a bad day. But she can't see that the marks from the slap are there. And so when you look back, I look back and I think about the lies that I tell teachers and all these things, and people knew, right? And even like borrowing addresses to go to different public schools, for example, right? What sides do you think people saw and knew that you did not know, even though you were saying these things, these lies to yourselves, in the way that the shape of your father's hand was a red welt on her face? What do you think of these moments, or you as this person now walking by these immigrant children, they might pretend to be something, give a facade when they interact with somebody else, but what can you see, even if they are trying to hide it or lie about it?
I was speaking at a conference of librarians last fall, and as I was preparing to go on stage, I thought about how this is the last stage where I feel nervous. Like this was home. It was a homecoming for me. And then I thought about how when I was a kid, I was terrified of cops, of sanitation workers, of anyone in uniform. I was terrified of teachers finding out the truth. But I was never scared in a library. I was never scared around librarians. It's not that I told them the truth. I would have lied if push came to shove, but I just knew that they were safe. And as I thought about that and then got to know the librarians over the course of the conference, I realized they were so very much aware of what kind of children are in the libraries without their parents. And I thought back at the kindnesses that the librarians have shown me, and I was like, of course they knew. Of course they knew that I was poor and probably undocumented and hungry, of course. But in my mind, I just felt like this place is safe. This place is home. Adults had that power to create those little bubbles of safety. And my third grade teacher, Miss Pong, in the book, I actually reconnected with her recently. And I remember thinking, like, I barely had just learned English. I didn't think I was anything special. But she said, I saw the rich world inside you. She told me this recently. I saw that you were a storyteller and a writer. So I'm not at all surprised by any of this. I also saw that you were going through a lot. I couldn't begin to understand what, but I just knew that I saw a lot of brightness and stories in you, and I wanted to bring that out. And so all of these things that I as a kid took as at face value, that she didn't know what was going on, and she was just giving me her favorite book because she loved Charlotte's Web. She was doing these intentional things because, again, when you're an educator, that's what you're trained to do. And so I then went through my my mother kept everything in mind. So my childhood diaries are all intact. I had notebooks of fiction that I wrote and like entries that I was required to write for class and submit. And I flipped through one entry and it said, I clearly lied in this entry to my teacher. I said, my cat is gone. I'm really sad. The reason my cat is gone is because we had a friend watch my cat and the friend just threw her out. Clearly just a bold-faced lie because I could not accept what my parents had done in getting rid of the cat. And the teacher had written in the comments, really? This really happened? Are you sure? What kind of friend is that? And so, of course, these lies that are spun by a 9-year-old's mind would not pass muster for an adult, but for me to even have the space to say, I am so sad because my cat is gone, she had to kind of maintain the facade that she believed it, right? Otherwise, she's like, well, where is your cat? What happened? Is there abuse going on? What's going on at home that someone just took your cat away? And so those glimmers of truth of who I was able to sneak out in the space and company of the adults who actually did see everything that I was dealing with and gave me the space to share what I felt safe to share.
Thanks for that, because it saddens me right now to hear about all these laws that are attacking librarians and teachers in terms of critical race theory, to basically tell stories like yours or to recommend these books. And it really saddens me that, especially in the state of Tennessee, this is an ongoing legislative act that we are going through right now. And I also wanted to say that one of the great things about America that becomes clear in your book, and that I'm very envious of in New York City, is the public library system. You are another amazing thinker that has come out of that amazing public system, from Ruth Bader Ginsburg to Sonia Sotomayor and the innumerable number of writers. And so a shout out to all public libraries and public librarians and public library card holders and all these things. Can we talk about what America means, this beautiful country? And clearly libraries are one of them. But I thought that the central tension in your family, and the whole time I was thinking, I was trying to figure out what the tension between your parents were, because you don't let us know until the very end. And for your father, it was the American dream. It was the American dream of having a car. And I have to say, there's only a few moments where I'm like, thank goodness we don't have public transportation. One of them is during COVID. I'm like, thank God I don't have to get on a train to go anywhere, or a bus. But then there was those heartbreaking moments when you and your mom worked so hard in that sushi cold plant, and you're like defrosting in the subway. And I'm thinking, man, it must be so hard to go up and down those steps. And I can imagine all the canals, all the steps up and down Chinatown. So your dad's vision of the American dream was like, he didn't want to move. He was so proud of that car. And even when it got stolen, he restored it. He could call the cops. But that mobility, that car was important for him. For your mom, it was the American dream in the sense that she wanted to be recognized as a citizen, to live in a legitimate manner. Those are two different dreams of the American dream. And can you, because that is, I think for me, that's the tension that your parents were going through. And I think you were beginning middle school when that began to bear out after your mom got sick. And so can you talk about how that played out? And then your dad came and joined you in Canada and all that. But I mean, how do you see those two different visions? They didn't tell you about any of this. But how do you understand it now when you think about their version of this beautiful country?
My father's love affair with America started very early, actually, for those who haven't read the book, his brother wrote something criticizing Chairman Mao during the Cultural Revolution, which of course was very dangerous to do. His brother then publicly distributed that piece of writing. And he was only 18 and very headstrong, very brilliant, exceedingly brilliant, but very headstrong. And so my uncle was deemed a treasonous writer and traitor and thrown into prison. And my father was only 6 years old at the time, but every day he saw his parents being beaten. He was attacked and thrown with names. He could never get an A or 100 out of a test, no matter how well he did or studied. And all he had left from his brother was the collection of banned books that his brother had hidden under the floorboards. And they were mostly American and British books. Mark Twain, F. Scott Fitzgerald. My father kept company with those books at night by candlelight when he missed his brother so much. And it started then, that he believed that America was this place where people could write the way that Mark Twain and Fitzgerald could, and people could be honest and call things out and criticize their government and their country and call out the things that they saw around them in a way that he was never able to find in China, even after he became an English professor. So this dream of being free in America in the free sense was his guidepost his whole life. My mother was a very proud and accomplished woman before we left China. She was really on the cutting edge of developing computer science technology. She would have been one of the forethinkers of computer science development in China had she stayed. She published textbooks on math and one of the first ones on computer science. She was really at the cusp of something. And because of my father's dream, which she never understood, because she grew up in a very different manner. She felt this torn between the duty to herself and her profession and her duty to her husband and family. And of course, being the woman that she is, she followed him. But once we were here, I think both my parents were caught flat-footed by the America they actually found. And I remember my father telling me that whereas in China, at least he had been a man, in America, he was half a man by virtue of his race. He was seen as weak and small and submissive. And so he lost even that little kernel that he at least had in China. And I think for him, being able to have a car, being able to drive and navigate and have agency and control over the car was the definition of manhood by American terms. And if you think about it, it's very common in our society. That's how things are portrayed on TV and in movies. And so I think it makes a lot of sense looking back why he would so fixate on the car. But I didn't understand any of it, nor did my mother, who was dealing with her own share of racism and misogyny from a very different perspective. And so all she wanted was to be able to regain a little bit of that profession, of that ability to provide for her family, of being able to have enough food in the kitchen. And she just did not understand why my father dug his heels in and said, we are going to have to stay here and fight until we make them recognize us, because America's the only place to be. And my mother just said, no, there's a bunch of other places where they can actually treat us with respect. Just be realistic. And there's a lot of, I can completely understand both perspectives now, even though back then I just did not have any insight into it. And to this day, my father is the most patriotic person I have ever met. You cannot say a single bad thing about America. I mean, he'll go on the street now and be spat on and told to go back to China, but he'll come back and say America is the freest land in the world. And it can be deeply frustrating sometimes to have a father that with such idealism, such love for the country, but it's also very, very inspiring because it does allow me to see the beauty of America. I mean, where else can so many different people live next to one another and just be so open with our disagreements and our discourse? I mean, that is part of the American tradition. And there are things here, there are beautiful things in this democratic experiment that we live in that are worth capturing, worth honoring, and worth remembering, and worth, I guess, reminding ourselves of when I sometimes think, like my mother, why am I still here? Why did I choose to live in a place that makes it so difficult for me to even walk down the street? And I have that love too. Unfortunately, my father gave it to me. And so I am determined to fight, not just for me and him, but for everyone else in our community.
Your mom is such a strong personality, and I wanted to ask if, I know that for your dad, he's very patriotic in the United States, but was the United States beautiful for your mom? And do you think that it was so interesting to read your account of America as being the New York version?
Yeah.
Right, being in the outer boroughs, having to like work hard and then take the subway and sharing bathrooms and the roach problems and all these, basically the difficulties of being poor in a city. Was the United States beautiful for your mom? They're in Jersey now, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. So I have this passage in the book where my mother would ask me, should we go back to China? And I always said yes, because China was wonderful and America smelled like pee, which is very much based on New York City and particularly its subway stations more than anything else, because that was all I was exposed to. But no, I don't think America was beautiful for my mother. I don't think it is for her, because for her, I mean, dignity and respect and security, understandably, were first and foremost. And she didn't have any of that here. And actually, when we moved back, I came back for college, and then my father came back to attend law school. He's actually an immigration lawyer for Chinese immigrants in Chinatown now. they actually lived in Brooklyn again, and things were hard again. It's just rent is hard, and you're going on the street and you're interacting with so many people. And she said, I just can't. I can't live in New York. If I have to be in America, then at least we are going to go to a place where it's a little easier. And so they live as close as possible to New York City without being in New York City, and that's Jersey City. And yeah, I think for my mother, America is beautiful in the sense that she sees that everything that I have been able to create in this country, I think that gives her a sense of meaning or purpose. But there are times we wonder, what would have happened if we stayed in China? What would have happened if we just stayed in Canada, if we'd gone to Canada directly? Mm-hmm. Why did my father insist on this very difficult route of just supreme idealism in the concept of liberty and freedom of speech? But yeah, I mean, she, as with all mothers and all wives and women, she really was trained to learn to put herself last. And so what her husband wanted trumped what she wanted. And now to see what my father and I have been able to do, at least in our work here, I think it's given her some understanding of the fact that maybe her sacrifice was worthwhile. And after she read my book, actually, she cried because she was so moved that her experiences in the sweatshop and sushi processing plant is now in a book, not because of her, but she said there were so many women in that room who were handling these clothing and then sending all their money back home and just stuck in this country that didn't seem to want us. And she said maybe it just makes her feel like some of their story is not out there.
Yeah, we have questions in the chat now, and Annie, I'll get to you in a second. I see your raised hand, but Amy Goldstein has asked, you just talked about your mom reading the book. Has your father read the book, and what was his reaction?
He has. He was really hesitant too, because there were some really dark and difficult memories, but he said that reading the book was like watching a movie where he was in it, except he had blacked out all of the scenes where he was a good person. So he only remembered the bad stuff that he did, and he carried a lot of that with him. I was really waiting for him to say I made it up, that, to deny everything, but he said, no, you reminded me that I still sang to you. I wrote a song and I sang to you, and I did save up money for that toy, and I did try to make you laugh by doing very silly things, and I completely forgot about it. I just thought I had completely abnegated the responsibility of being your father and the responsibility of being your mother's husband. And so I think it's given him a lot of amnesty and forgiveness over the past. And so what he ultimately said was that he felt really freed by reading the book and very much healed. And in the time since they read the book and the three of us spent time together, I feel that there is a new lightness, because before we were tiptoeing around this dark hole that was between all three of us. And now there is no tiptoeing, there's no worry about what is being unsaid, because it's all been said already.
Annie, Solomon, you have a question?
My question, I think you kind of answered it, was about the disconnect between all the suffering that you and your family experienced in America and the welcome that you received in Canada, at least, at the beginning, and why you ever came back, and why you, when the book opens, you're so happy to be an American citizen, and yet you suffered so much. My husband's a Canadian, and I lived in Canada for a long time, and I just wonder about that choice. If you had stayed, and if you hadn't come back to school here, would you have stayed in Canada? And I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I often ask myself. So from the minute that we arrived in Canada, I thought about my father and why we left China at all. and it was to build a home in the land of the free. And I felt like I had been kicked out. I felt like there had been no choice for us but to leave.
Mhm.
And as the days passed and things seemed to change overnight, like all of a sudden we had paperwork. All of a sudden I could go to a doctor or dentist. My mother could go to the hospital she needed. My mother immediately got a high-paying job. It was all very confusing, and all of the struggle that I had learned to navigate, live under, was gone. There was no struggle anymore, and yet I had come to be defined by that struggle, and perhaps it's in part in my dissident blood to find the struggle. My new struggle became, I have to fight my way back to the United States. I have to prove to them that they cannot just get rid of me that easily.
Gotcha.
And yeah, from just, weeks in Canada, that became my goal, and I was single-minded in that pursuit. There was no way I was not going to come back to school in the United States. I mean, I would have gone to any school if it was at the side of the border, and it was because I just wanted to prove to America that I was worthy. And I think that fixation on top of the resonant effects of the previous years, things can get repaired materially very quickly. But for instance, every time I had a full meal, my stomach just didn't know what to do, and I felt like I had to throw up. So all through the end of high school, if I ever ate too much, like too much being having a full stomach, I would feel like I had to throw up. And of course, all of the psychological effects from everything remained unaddressed. And so in the peace and security of Canada, I was still in that vacuum, that echo chamber from the previous years, because I didn't have the tools to make sense of it. And really none of us did. The three of us just said, we're fine now, so what's the big deal? We'll just carry on and pretend it didn't happen. But that's not how humans work. That's not how trauma works. And we carried it with us until we were able to confront it. So I think that in many senses, the privileges that Canada accorded to us, we were not able to fully appreciate because we were just too shell-shocked, for lack of a better word.
Makes sense.
Question?
It's a very powerful moment. I have a comment on that, but Marsha Ramey has both has a question in the chat, and she's raised her electronic hand. So, Marsha, we got to unmute you. We got to unmute you, let you ask the question.
Thank you, Ben. And actually, my question that I wanted to ask live kind of supersedes a question I had in the chat. So, I guess I just really wanted to express a lot of appreciation to you for this story, because it is such a true immigrant story. And it really resonated for me, because my father was a survivor of the Holocaust. And, and he was in Israel immediately after the war, and he had to go to Canada for a couple of years before he could immigrate to the US. And of course, he had tremendous challenges. But as you said, I mean, that trauma that he experienced in the concentration camps and the things that he had to do to survive there greatly impacted how he was as a father. So it really, I mean, I really was in tears so many times, when you talked about the abuse your father, played out on you, and it took me a long time to understand, well, that's what my father knows. He doesn't know how to be a loving parent all the time. And it is the same too, was like, there were many times he's very affectionate, but then all of a sudden the brute would come out, and, now I understand, okay, that's what he had to do. He had to be perfect. He had to eat at a certain time. He had to, everything had to be just so for him to survive the camps. So I very much could relate, and I appreciated, I really liked your voice of using, your Chinese words as you would in a conversation, and just as it came to you, and not stopping to explain, because again, that was kind of like the half Yiddish, stuff of how my dad, talked. So just an appreciation. And again, relevance. We discussed in my sisterhood book club also.
I'm honored. Thank you. Yeah, the first time I read Mouse, I was shocked by how generational trauma works. It really has no borders. It works the same in every family. We get handed these blueprints early in life, and until we consciously look at them and spend a lot of time and energy trying to break away from them, unless we do that, we pass it down without even knowing. And in understanding that, it just gave me so much more appreciation for my father, that he had to do everything he could to survive and just wanted me to survive and be safe. And so he unwittingly passed down a lot. And that was part of what encouraged me to say, I'm going to turn around and stare this in the face, because it has to end with me. I'm going to mess up my future kids up in many ways, but they have to be new ways. they can't be the same. So
yeah, that's what I always told my ex-husband and I told our kids, is that, yeah, we're screwing up. You need something to keep your therapist in business when you grow up. And also my sisterhood book club wants the next phase. We want to know how you did in Canada, you got to high school, how you came to this place of understanding. So
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. As we come close to the end of the hour, and it's an hour later in New York, and I want to be mindful of that. There are a couple questions. One is that will there be a sequel or other forms of writing that you are working on, typing away in the subway? Or the other question is, are you surprised at how well received this book has been? By Margaret Lippman has asked that question.
Yeah, I'll take the second one first. And yes, absolutely. I'm surprised. I guess I was a little bit too much of a jaded litigator going into this process. And I just kept telling everyone who expressed faith about my book before it came out that nobody cares about a little Chinese girl. And that's really, I guess, says a lot about what I experienced. But turns out a lot of people care about a little Chinese girl. And even in the midst of all the politics that are going on, and it's just meant so much to me. I mean, I get emails from all over the country, all over the world, people everywhere who say, I don't know what it's like, but my heart breaks having read this, and you have given me a new understanding of what a very different community goes through. And that openness and that love for people who may not look like anyone that that readers know, that shows me that there is a lot of good in this country, and that there is good reason to be hopeful for our future, no matter what's going on right now. And as for the future works, I am currently working on a novel about Asian American women working in big law firms in New York City. A little bit, drawing on my adult experiences and building composite characters and situations. I felt like I had a lot of material from my time in that world, a lot of material that people might say I made up, even if I told it exactly as it happened. So I thought I might as well write a novel with that material, and also give my parents a breather from the nonfiction and the gruel of it. But I didn't initially think that I would write a sequel memoir, because I truly did not think about Beautiful Country as being about me or my family. I thought about it as being about childhood, about immigration, about what it means to grow up and what it means to be American. But now that so many people have asked about a sequel, the wheels are turning in my head, and I'm thinking, as long as I can find something important to say, I will write a follow-on. But I think I need a little bit more time to process all that happened afterwards.
Spectacular. One last question from Nancy Reisman, and because my kids are here, and they're too afraid to be on screen. They're like on both sides. They're listening
I
attentively.
saw them. They're cute.
Did you see them?
I did.
They just came back from the basketball. They haven't eaten dinner. They came up to see you. They were listening in the car. Now
Oh.
this is a question from Nancy Reisman and for my kids. Any advice for first or second generation students at public schools, poor schools, rich schools, private schools, college kids, to young writers who are committed or who love to read and want to write, but they might be dealing with some kind of secret or lies, a sense of shame or displacement? Any advice for these young brains?
Yeah. Well, first, I would say read as much as possible. That is the best way to become a good writer and also understand stories. And I bet that as you read many books, you'll start to see people and experiences that reflect the things that you are ashamed of. I mean, for me, it came in The Diary of Anne Frank. It came in The Giver. It came in Charlotte's Web. It gave me this recognition that maybe there was something worthwhile inside me. And I would also say, just be very patient with yourself. I mean, I wanted to write the story for as long as I could remember, but I never felt safe to do that. And I felt like I was wasting time. But whatever work you produce, it lives inside you and it only grows as you grow. So if you need more time, take that time. Take that time to understand yourself. Take that time to understand what your story really is. Take that time to hear other people's stories, as many stories as you can hear, because it only gives you more empathy and understanding for yourself. And when the story is ready to come out, you will know. And when that happens, write it like I did, which was telling myself with every word, every syllable, no one is ever going to read this, because that was the only way that I was going to feel secure enough to pour out all of these secrets that I never told before. So I hope that those 3 points give you at least a starting point, and just please know that your story and your voice is important, is unique, and is vital to our world. And I'll be here cheering you on whenever you need it, when you're ready to go out there.
Thank you so much, Qian Julie Wang. This has been, you are a beautiful person that has made this country more beautiful. So thank you to you and for all the participants and the audience members for taking the time. Thank you to the JCC. Thank you to Vanderbilt, Asian Studies, English, Creative Writing. Thank you so much, Julie. And hopefully, maybe I'll see you in Chinatown one day.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ben, for all the thought and effort and work you put into this and into basketball, more importantly. But this was the most insightful conversations I've had, and it's all thanks to you. Thank you for your brilliance. Really appreciated that.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks to all, especially to Qian Julie Wang. This is wonderful, and great thanks to Ben and to all of you for joining us. We hope that you'll be interested in the upcoming events on March 14th with Heather Cabot, the New Chardonnay, and March 28th and April 7th. Please look at the website for the JCC for upcoming